It's the voice of the one and only DJ Scream, letting you know that you are now in tune to the Casual Flex, where culture meets sports and casuals are welcome. Now here's your host, Phillip Dukes.
Yo, welcome to the signing day special edition of the Casual Flex. I'm your host, Phillip Dukes, aka Dukes the Scoop. Check me out on Twitter and Instagram at Dukes the Scoop, and make sure you go hit that like and subscribe button. Today, doing something that's maybe considered taboo. Maybe I shouldn't do it. Maybe it's an issue. Who knows? But this is the Casual Flex, and we kind of like blur the lines a little bit right here. So who I have today as my guest is probably one of the fastest rising recruiting analysts in the game, Jeremy Johnson of On3. Now, if you don't know who this guy is, make sure you go follow him on Twitter. He has all of the updates. He's one of those guys when it comes to recruiting. So, Jeremy, what's going on, dog?
Nothing much, man. Just trying to catch my breath. Getting ready to go at it again tomorrow.
Right. A crazy day, a very crazy day. For those who don't know, Jeremy worked for the previously before he got to On3 as a national recruiter analyst or regional. Are you regional or national?
National, but focused in, the Southeast, and, Georgia, Alabama, Florida. So,
okay.
Southeast. So, we can go.
A great resource for what we need to do tonight. But you previously worked at the Athens Herald Banner, I think?
The Athens Banner Herald over here in Athens, just covering Georgia. Just getting to know those guys, covering some high school football, and I grew up in Athens, so it was like just living in my backyard for a while. So
right, and for somebody who I've had plenty of conversations with, it's like anytime I ask you about somebody, you know them. I might say, hey, you know this? Oh yeah, I know him. Yeah, run the 4.340. Mama makes a real good spaghetti. Has
I love some spaghetti now.
All right, so man, let's get right into it. Hugh Freeze and Auburn pull off what some people may consider almost impossible, to get Auburn into the top 20 in a recruiter rankings, and with some more time to go, to possibly get into the top 15, depending on how some of these next commitments go. In the secondary signing day in February, how big or how much of an impact do you think Hugh Freeze had on Auburn's recruiting? And what do you think that he did well in order to get Auburn where they are right now?
Freeze, he was one of those great recruiters, even at Ole Miss. I feel like he came into Auburn just with a bunch of momentum. I feel like they hit the ground running, supporting him. And I feel like he just has a swagger and a juice, and he knows the Southeast. So I feel like it was a great fit. It was a great fit from a hiring standpoint, but then also he already just had so many connections that he just tapped back into them when he got back into the SEC. And I think the thing he's done the most is probably just sell these young guys on the excitement that is coming to that program and the opportunity to play. A lot of these guys will play. They'll play early and they'll play a lot. So, if I'm a young player that wants to get in and prove themselves, like Hugh Freeze is coming with an opportunity to go play in the SEC West, from day one. That's going to be hard to turn down for a lot of guys that are trying to get to the NFL and to get developed. You can get developed somewhere sitting, or you can just develop somewhere by, living the experience. I feel like that's one of the things he was able to offer, a multitude of these guys.
And I think that's so key as far as being able to get game film and be developed. So even if you don't have the best film when you first get on the field, you can show your development if you continue to develop, and to show that you're coachable, and can also show your potential can be realized. So I think that's a really key point. So let's get into some of the players. So Auburn pulled off a huge flip, made a lot of headlines today by getting defensive lineman Keldrick Faulk. Tell me what you know about Keldrick Faulk and how big that is for Auburn to be able to get somebody like that.
First thing is the young man himself is a high character type guy. I've spoken to him multiple times. He's always been very respectful. He plays in a small community, so that community has just kind of been, has wrapped their arms around him. So he's one of those type guys that you bring into the program, and eventually he changes your locker room's culture. He's a really good football player. He's big, strong, he's athletic, he runs really fast. He does a little bit of everything for his high school team. He's kind of the guy that everybody knows that, they got to shut him down. He's the guy that you game plan for. So he's used to being double teamed, triple teamed. So, he's not going to be worried about that. But I really feel like his biggest asset is just being one of those culture setters. He's going to be first in the line, running sprints. He's going to be the guy that's going to be there in the weight room. He's the guy that's going to push the young players. And he's going to be a young guy that'll be able to, over the next 3 years, just really be a face of what that defense is going to look like.
Man, and to think about it, and getting Keldrick Faulk it doesn't stop there. He also has a little brother that's going to be a highly rated recruit, Caleb Faulk. I think he's maybe a 26 or a 25, maybe a 26. 25? I think
so, yeah. Linebacker.
You say he's an outside linebacker?
Yeah, I want to say he plays a little inside as well. He's another really good athlete. He has a lot of the same, attributes, mentally that his brother has. He's a little more soft-spoken, but he can really go as well. So, that they're putting themselves in a good position early by getting the older brother and potentially looking at the younger brother down the road. But yeah, being able to recruit that family, and they're only about probably 45 minutes from Auburn. So
right,
they're really close with that community.
So you go from Keldrick Faulk and you stay along the defensive line. Auburn has to replace two studs, Colby Wooden and Derek Hall. And you may have done that with Keldrick Faulk and Darren Reed from Columbus. Tell us what you know about Darren Reed.
You can never have enough of those. I mean, I think you kind of hit it on the head when you say you got to replace Derek Hall and, Colby Woolen over there. Those two guys have been playing have played a lot of football for Auburn. I feel like, Darren and Keldrick Faulk will both, be guys that kind of step into that role early on in their careers, and they'll both, kind of fill the roles left. I know there'll be young players, but eventually young players grow up after they take their lumps. So, I feel like that'll be that having both of those guys as the 1-2 on that one side together will be, big. They'll pay dividends here in the next maybe 2 years.
Where do you see Darren Reed playing on the defensive line after he develops?
I think he probably played the 3 technique. I mean, he played the 5. He's a versatile guy just because of his size and athletic ability. So, anytime you get a guy that big that can move around, you just use him wherever you can fit him, because there's so much passing going on nowadays. Those guys got to be able to slide up and out off the line. You can't really say you just got you just gonna be the one gap guy. He's more than that, as a player.
Canley flips from Ohio State. Cedar Grove comes from a heck of a program fresh off probably one of the worst referee calls, officiating calls in the history of the state championship games in Georgia. I really feel for that referee who made that call, because he's taking a beating right now. But after the heartbreak, Canley decides that Auburn is the school for him instead of Ohio State. Tell us what you know about Canley.
I know he will hit you. He will hit you hard. He's one of those corners. It's like, he doesn't play like a corner. He plays like a safety that's just been forced to play corner, or a linebacker that's forced to play corner, because, he put a lick on a guy in the state championship game that, I was looking down doing something on my phone and I heard the lick. I didn't even have to look. I knew who it was. So yeah, he's a physical football player, man. We don't say that about cornerbacks typically now, especially nowadays. There's so much throwing the ball around. Guys, they're cover guys. They don't get paid to tackle. So Canley makes his money putting licks on people. He's mean. He's a physical, muscular, very stout built corner. So, I think he could, be able. We talked about culture setters. I feel like he's another guy that kind of would fit into that category and kind of be one of those guys that, kind of builds like that toughness and that nastiness that you need to play in that SEC West, because, as much as we talk about the quarterback position, as much as we talk about the, the passing stats, the game of football is won with me, big, fast, and physical football players that will eventually fight you for that inch. Canley's one of those guys that will do that. And I think Auburn hit a home run landing this guy. I think he'll be a contributor really early just because of his attitude. He played a lot of big football games. He's played a lot of high-level 7-on-7 football. So he won't be surprised by a lot.
And Can reminds me so much of Pac-Man.
Yeah.
Like when I think about Can, I think about Pac-Man, and growing up with Pac, just seeing his tenacity. He's like a more, I guess, quiet Pac-Man. Like he leads with that like he's super aggressive in the game. But you won't get a lot of the stuff that you got from Pac when he was younger. At Can's age, it would have been a lot, like if Pac would have been different, he would have went to Georgia Tech. But at the time, Atlanta probably was the worst place for him to be in college. So he got to go to West Virginia. But Can had such a good attitude just from knowing him and for a while. Seeing the family he comes from, a football family, got a lot of guys who are really good athletes. His cousin Ricky Lee signed with UAB today, played on the other side of him. I think Canley probably may be the home run of this class based on how he plays and being a tone setter on the perimeter, which you don't get a lot of. To your point, you don't get a lot of tone setters on the perimeter that can cover. It's either a lot of times is if you can hit the way he does, you're usually a liability in coverage. So I don't know. Do you think he could slide in and play some nickel?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean that may be even, a little bit of an advantage for him just because of the physicality. You can throw him at the nickel on rundowns. You don't necessarily have to bring an extra linebacker in because he can set an edge and he'll be willing to, and he'll be that guy that'll come in the alley and he'll take that fullback on. He'll take that running back on. He'll take those licks because, that's just how he plays the game. So I feel like he will be able to match up with it doesn't really matter how much bigger, like these tight ends and these slot guys are starting to go the other way. You think about the slots, it's the small guys, but you're going to start seeing the Ethan Davises coming into the SEC, right. And they're going to be playing basketball in the slot. So right. He's not going to be afraid of that. I mean, they may be taller, but he's going to get up in them. And that's right. That's just kind of what he's going to do. I mean, I think the nickel may even be a path for him to play earlier just because he can get in there and do that.
Let's talk about one of the longest tenured commits in this cycle for Auburn, and that's safety Terrence Love out of Langston Hughes. What do you know about T. Love and his game, and how do you feel like he would fit in Auburn's culture?
We just talked about a bunch of physical football players. This is another one. This is another guy that will hit you and he will and stand over you and maybe talk a little stuff to you. But he's one of the nicest kids off the field, just really nice and well-mannered and very intelligent. He's a very intelligent person, very intelligent football player.
Right.
But he's very physical. So I feel like, this four we've talked about, this is a physical tone, a group that Auburn has put in place. Obviously Terrence has played some safety, some wide receiver. He's played some quarterback in his past. So he's experienced a little bit of everything on the football field. So I don't feel like he'll have a problem transitioning to wherever they want him to play just because he's already done it all. He can play linebacker. He can play in the slot. He can play if you need somebody to go catch a jump ball. He can go do that too. So. I feel like he's another home run in his class. I feel like he's kind of gotten, because he's been committed so long, people kind of forgot about him. It's just like because he's so good at football, and then he plays on this Langston Hughes team that was just loaded with talent, and he was one of those guys that got to play early, and he had a lot of success early on, and some of the other guys have grown up around him, and he was always that that rock, and I think that'll be the same thing at Auburn. He will be one of those players that Auburn will be forced, to count on early, and he will, respond to that. So, yeah, I mean, I think they hit a home run there as well, just, being one of those guys that play a lot of big football games.
How fast do you think T. Love is right now?
I mean, I think he probably runs about a 4.5 or 4.4, somewhere in there.
And a lot of people don't really realize how fast T. Love is because of how big he is. And because usually guys his size in high school play linebacker. What people don't realize, man, T. Love has wide receiver offers because he's really like that outside perimeter guy. So getting a guy like that on defense, I think, is really important because you want guys who are playmakers, have hands, and he wears a size 3X glove. Like, I remember one time I was out, and I think DJ Sturgis has the gloves from V103. He has the gloves, and he gave T Love some gloves, and T Love was like, "They too small." He was like, "Nah." He was like, "Dog, I gave you a 2X." He was like, "They too small," and they were really too small. Like the guy really wears a 3X glove playing safety, so that's crazy. So going from T Love, we're in the secondary. You got a lot of guys that we've already talked about. Now let's get to one of Auburn's probably biggest deficiency, and that's offensive line. Tell us what you know about Braden Joyner.
I know he's an interior guy. He's played a lot of football in his high school career over it. He's played in a couple different high schools. So, he's a guy that plays a run. He's nasty in the run game. He can come in and road grade you, but, you have to wonder what he's going to be able to do in pass protection, just because of his, he's not as long as some of these other guys are. But, I just wonder, I feel like at the very least, he'll be an impactful run blocker. And, Auburn we keep talking about this attitude stuff. And, Hugh Freeze is one of those that, his offense is based off the run, but he does a lot of the spread around and throw it around stuff as well when he runs a quarterback. So, I think that, they will have to establish the run. And Brandon's one of those players over the next couple of years that probably could come in and, develop, get a little bigger and get a little stronger and be one of those impactful guys that helps you kind of get those short yards in the future. He was very loyal and stayed committed throughout all this. Obviously all the coaching changes, everything that came out last year about, all the whispers. He was one of the first guys to commit to this class. So I want to say it was around this time last year when he first committed. So he stuck through it, and I think he's been a real leader and trying to rally those guys and keep those guys around. I think that'll translate to him being one of the guys, the voices, for this program moving forward.
Connor Lew from Kennesaw Mountain, a flip from Miami, another interior offensive lineman. He wants to be a pilot. Everybody talks about his intellect. How does he fit in this class, and what do you think about his skill set?
Him and Braden are actually pretty similar. You wonder about the pass protection and the length and the sheer just size of them, but the one thing they're both going to do is they're going to block in the run game, and they're going to be tone setters when it comes to trying to establish that run. Connor's he's played some center, he's played some guard, so him and Braden could be interchangeable there. I know both can play the center position, so I feel like you want to start building something, you want to start building it from the inside out, and Auburn did that with these two. Connor's very intelligent, so centers. I played on the offensive line, and typically the GPAs went from lower on the outside to the guy in the center, and the center was the highest GPA on the team. So, those centers tend to be very intelligent people because, they got to go and call those signs. They got to be the one that communicates with the quarterback, and then also they got to be tough enough to be able to be the one to dig that zero technique out of there if you have to. So, I think both of those players are, big gets for Auburn. I think they'll both be, keys to trying to set up what Hugh Freeze and that offense wants to do, moving forward. People don't talk about those positions enough because, they're doing the dirty work. So I think both of those guys are going to be guys okay with going in there and doing the dirty work. And that's what Auburn needs. They need those guys that, can set the culture, do the dirty work, and do it for over these next. They need to do it for 3 to 4 years because they're going to have to play a lot of football. Just, everybody we're talking about is going to have to make an impact for Auburn at some point soon.
All right, so the last Auburn recruit we'll talk about will be Colton Hood out of Eagles Landing. Auburn legacy, his uncle is Roderick Hood, played about 9 years in the NFL at a high level. What do you know about Colton, and how do you feel like he fits?
He came on really late just because, this year he had a big year on the football field. I think people kind of had been sleeping on him a little bit just because he was a baseball guy. He's played a lot of good baseball, and he, had some offers to play baseball. So that tells you the kind of athlete he is. And I feel like, him going over there, obviously another corner, or he plays a little bit of everything for Eagles Landing Christian, but I think he's projected as a corner. So anytime you can add depth to that position, just with where the game is today, that's going to be big. He's not a tall guy. He's about 6'1", or actually I think he's about 6 foot or 6'1". I'm not sure.
About 6 feet. Yep.
Yeah. So I mean, he'll be he'll be interchangeable. You can play the outside a little bit, play the inside, maybe play a little safety a little bit. So also not sure if it's his cousin or his brother that plays running back. That's another
his brother. His brother is the running back, is the tail, and his cousin is the full that plays a little linebacker.
Well, that's a football playing family. So all those guys can play. So if Auburn is able to get his brother in the fold as well next year, that'll be big because he's a really good football player. So
Brandon Hood is who we talking about. He's a 24 kid, Brandon Hood. Before he got hurt this year, he was going off for 200 yards a game like it was nothing.
They both are very explosive, strong guys in the weight room. You could tell they come from a family that highly value the working out and the staying on top of their bodies. So I feel like they're both. I mean, Colton's going this year. I feel like he would be a guy that will come in and bring that professional mindset towards the program, and he'll be a big help on that secondary.
All right, so what does Hugh Freeze have to do in Auburn in order to get Auburn into the upper echelon of the SEC versus the Kirby Smarts of the world and the Nick Sabans of the world? Now, you've seen Georgia before Kirby and after Kirby. You saw how this and it could be a budding dynasty. How does Auburn get in there and become that second-tier team like Georgia was to Alabama and to eventually knock Georgia off?
All about the trenches, man. You go and get the dudes that play in those trenches, eventually it all equalizes. I mean, you may have to hit on a quarterback at some point, and I'm sure Hugh Freeze will be one of those attractive places for a quarterback, especially one that can, do the dual threat and the running and he'll be a guy that'll be, attractive for a quarterback at some point. But the difference between Georgia and everybody else right now is their trenches. Offensively and defensively, they have guys that will play in the NFL and they will play for a long time. So, I mean, you look at Alabama. Alabama's the same way. Will Anderson's about to be top 5. He'll be no later than the 5th pick in the draft.
Right.
And, Dallas Turner will flip the cycle, and Dallas Turner will be the guy we talk about next year. Then we'll flip the cycle again, and then it'll be Keon Keeley. So it's like that's where you got to win. You got to win in those battles, getting those, those guys that, take over games, in the trenches.
Yeah, either you got to be able to go get the quarterback, and then after you go get the quarterback, you got to protect your quarterback. So those are
or just like Georgia does sometimes, they just maul you into the ground after they get a lead on you. I mean, Georgia's won games that seem like they're 17-0, but if you just look at the body blows they put on another team, it's really like 75-0.
It's just like lean,
it's just like a big dude that just lay on you when you like. It's just like, all right, man, you won. They just take your spirit just with their weight almost. So,
man, that's crazy. All right, look, we got to talk about something. Deion at Colorado. How you feel like Deion did in his first signing day at Colorado?
No, I think Deion didn't. I don't think he had enough time to really. I don't think he had enough time to make the impact like he made at Jackson State. Because at Jackson State, the first time when he moved over there, he got a couple years before he landed Travis Hunter.
Right.
And I think this was like, he had a couple weeks, and then he was coaching he was coaching Celebration Bowl, so he couldn't really get in there and do. But even off of that, he still was able to be disruptive.
Right.
He showed up in a few recruitments out of nowhere. He showed up in Bo Hewlett's recruitment. He's shown up in Cormani McClain's recruitment. Cormani McClain didn't even sign today, and he was supposed to sign to Miami.
I know. I heard that.
There are reports that Deion Sanders in Colorado are there talking to him, and there are conversations being had. So at the very least, right now, he's being involved and he's being a disruptor. Now, next year, this time, I see him having one of those classes where he can go out and get the 4- and 5-star guys because he'll have time to go and recruit them, build those relationships. So, and now you're not talking about selling the guy on coming to an HBCU. You're selling guys on coming to Colorado where they win the Pac-12 and dominate. They're going to the college football playoff. That's
right.
Nothing against Jackson State, and I think I really appreciate Deion for doing that. But like now, we talking about playing for college football's national championship, not an HBCU.
FBS. Yeah. I mean FCS. All right, so you got Travis Hunter, who you just mentioned. So you got Travis Hunter and Deion and possibly Cormani McClain. If Deion was able to pull that off, do you think that really, do you think that getting those two DBs, do you think that makes enough impact for him to be able to start to say Colorado may be the premier program in the Pac-12?
Oh, yeah. I mean, over the next years, the Pac-12 they're gonna lose USC and UCLA.
Right.
That'll be some competition going right there, just in strength, just off numbers, and then you start recruiting these 4 and 5 star athletes, and then you're attracting guys in the transfer portal.
Right.
His son's a good quarterback, so I mean, if he ends up there, it's starting to build where it's gonna be. There's gonna be some pieces in place for them to compete, and I think that's gonna be the expectation. Now, it won't happen instantly. I think it will not just be a popcorn thing that happens. It will be a slow build, but I do think eventually he will win at Colorado. How big, to me, is the question. What is success for Deion Sanders? Is it Colorado being in the college football playoff, or is it Colorado being 6-6 going to a decent bowl game every year? Because I think that's kind of where the trajectory is going to be over the next 2 years at least. Right.
Jeremy, where can everybody find you?
I'm on Twitter, Jeremy _Johnson _O. On3.com. You can find me at Dogs HQ, ClemsonSports.com. I'm writing for both of those sites on the On3 network.
Hey, just so y'all know, we the Black, Rusty, and Chad right here. This is Rusty and Chad. Y'all better mentor us for sure.